development of seaports in Africa. Most of the ports were built during the colonial era, and there was very little thinking in terms of draft limitations at the time. And most of the ports were also located closer to the metropolis. And with increasing population and growth in traffic, especially as a result of the container revolution, increasingly you find very little capacity for these ports to expand. And what that has done is it has resulted in most of West African ports being heavily congested. And that's the phenomenon that we are facing right now with most of the West African ports.
And let's talk a bit about those West African ports. Clearly, Nigeria seems to be the logical place to invest, given the population, given its positioning in the region. But give us a sense of what is going on with regards to investments in ports in the region right now.
Nigeria undertook some major policy reforms in 2004. It decided to concession most of its terminal operations, 26 in total, to the private sector. And what that has done is it had helped significantly reduce the berthing time for vessels who are entering in Nigeria, and as a result has significantly reduced congestion charges that shipping lines have been adding to imports and exports out of Nigeria. For instance, immediately after the launching of the reforms, shipping lines have reduced their congestion charges from $525 to $75, which, if you take on an annual basis, was almost $200 million worth of savings to the Nigerian economy. But that's more or less a short-term fix. But as the population continues to grow and demand for imports and exports continue to grow, there is the increasing need to have a deep sea port where you can have much deeper draft to be able to attract mega vessels, which is what is prevalent in some of the big economies like Singapore, Rotterdam, things like that.
All right. Yeah. Well, so how do we get the investments now? There's a sense that these are huge multi-billion-dollar investments. I mean, the seaport that is being proposed in Lagos, for instance, we're hearing that it's going to cost well over $1 billion.
Absolutely.
Give us a sense of how to get the financing. How do we get the investments in for these projects?
Like you rightly stated, these are huge investments, and it would require some form of public-private partnership. Increasingly, African governments are moving away from having the national port authorities be operator as well as the regulator. Increasingly, you see most ports are being concessioned. The most recent were in Sierra Leone, which was concession to the Bolloré Group, and it should attract investments in the range of 120, 130 million for the next 2 to 3 years. A similar exercise was conducted in Liberia, where the government appointed APM Mola as the concessionaire, and they also expected to invest up to $100 million in the next year or two. In Nigeria, there are plans to develop a deep sea port at Lekki, like you rightly stated, and I think it is the most natural location for a deep sea port within West Africa, given that Nigeria accounts for up to 60% of the population of West Africa. It would make more sense to locate the deep sea port here and to have use it as a transshipment hub for other African destinations.
And let's talk about that, because we know places like Spain and Oman, they tend to be hubs, like you mentioned.
Absolutely.
Give us a sense of how that model can work in West Africa.
Yes, like I stated, the way it would work is you would locate a deep sea port. Well, there's argument whether the region can handle more than one, maybe one or two. But naturally, it will be best located somewhere along the Nigerian coastline for the simple reason that it would reduce the volume of transshipment that one will have to make. And what that does is if you look at most of the imports into West Africa, they come mostly from the Far East. And right now, what happens, it's put in mega vessels. It goes to the Jazeeras, then it's offloaded into medium-sized to smaller vessels to be able to ply the West African coast.
So it goes to the Middle East first?
First, yes. Then it's discharged to smaller vessels to come to West Africa. So you can eliminate that intermediate handling, from the Far East to West Africa by having a deep sea port within the sub-region.